truly have free will? The idea that we are autonomous individuals making choices based on our own desires and rationality is a cornerstone of modern thought. But what if our sense of freedom is an illusion? What if our choices are shaped, perhaps even predetermined, by forces beyond our control? Forces embedded in the very fabric of society. In this video, we'll explore the question of free will through the lens of Antonio Gramsci's concept of superstructures. Gramsci, an Italian Marxist philosopher, argued that society isn't just governed by laws or economics, but by a complex web of cultural norms, values, and ideas that reinforce the power of the dominant class. These cultural structures, the superstructures, don't just reflect society, they actively shape it, influencing how we think, act, and even what we believe is possible. So, what does this mean for free will? Are we truly free agents, or are we products of the superstructure? And if our choices are shaped by the culture around us, is there any way to resist? To answer these questions, we'll dive deeper into Gramsci's theories and examine how power operates in the shadows of culture. Let's begin. Historical and theoretical context. To understand Gramsci's ideas about superstructures and their connection to free will, we need to situate them in their historical and theoretical context. Gramsci developed his theories during a turbulent time in the early 20th century Italy, a period marked by rising fascism, economic instability, and the failure of revolutionary movements he had hoped would transform society. Gramsci was a Marxist, but his perspective evolved from classical Marxist thought. Traditional Marxism, as laid out by Karl Marx, viewed society as consisting of two key components: the base and the superstructure. The economic base, the relations and means of production, was seen as a foundation of society, determining everything from laws to culture. The superstructure in this framework was a reflection of the base, a secondary construct that maintained the status quo. But Gramsci thought that this was too simplistic. He argued that the superstructure wasn't just a passive reflection of economic conditions. Instead, it actively shaped society by influencing people's beliefs, values, and consent of existing power structures. This is where Gramsci introduced his groundbreaking concept of cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony, Gramsci argued, is the process by which the ruling class maintains its power not through brute force, but by shaping the cultural norms and ideologies that make the status quo seem natural, inevitable, or even desirable. Education, religion, media, and art, all these elements of the superstructure work together to create a shared worldview that reinforces existing power relations. In this context, free will becomes a complicated concept. If our choices are framed by the dominant cultural narratives we're exposed to, how free are we really? Are our desires and decisions our own? Or are they subtly molded by the superstructure? Gramsci's ideas were deeply shaped by his own experiences. As political activist and intellectual, he spent much of his life in prison under Mussolini's fascist regime. It was during this imprisonment that he wrote his most influential work, the Prison Notebooks. In these writings, Gramsci delves into the mechanisms of cultural control, offering us tools to interrogate not just power, but the very foundations of how we think. Gramsci's theories don't exist in isolation. They resonate with other thinkers who explored the ways ideology influences human behavior. Louis Althusser, for instance, built on Marx and Gramsci to develop the concept of ideological state apparatuses, institutions like school, media, and religion that reinforce dominant ideologies. Similarly, Michel Foucault's work on power and discourse helps illuminate how ideas shape reality itself. Through these lenses, free will can be seen as a battleground, a constant negotiation between the individual and the structures that seek to define their reality. But how does this look in practice? How does cultural hegemony manifest in the choices we make? And can we ever break free? To explore these questions, we need to delve deeper into the dynamics of consent, coercion, and resistance within the superstructure. Case studies. To bring Gramsci's ideas about superstructures and free will to life, Let's look at some concrete examples. These case studies will help us explore how cultural hegemony operates in shaping our choices and whether it's possible to resist. Number 1. Education. Shaping the mind from the ground up. Imagine a classroom. For most of us, school is where we learn to read, to write, and to think critically. But it's also where we absorb societal norms and values. Gramsci argued that education is one of the most powerful tools of the superstructure, a means to install the ideologies of the dominant class. Take, for example, history curricula. In many countries, history is taught from a perspective that glorifies national achievements, while downplaying or ignoring colonialism, systemic oppression, or resistance movements. This selective storytelling creates a sense of national identity that aligns with the interests of those in power. The result? Students grow up with a framework that shapes their understanding of what's possible or desirable within their society, often without realizing it. Can students, or anyone, truly make free informed choices when their understanding of the world has been subtly shaped by the superstructure of education? Number 2. Media and advertising. Manufacturing desires. Now think about the media we consume every day. TV shows, advertisements, social media posts. Gramsci's concept of cultural hegemony is highly relevant here, as the media often serves as the voice of the dominant ideology. Consider the beauty industry. Advertising promotes specific standards of beauty, thinness, youth, or particular skin tones that are not just arbitrary but deeply tied to cultural and economic systems. These standards generate desires and insecurities, shaping consumer behavior in ways that benefit powerful corporations. When you buy that anti aging cream or follow that fitness trend, is it truly a free choice? Or has the superstructure conditioned you to believe that this is what you need to do to be valued? Number 3. Political campaigns. Consent through persuasion. Another powerful example is modern political campaigns. Gramsci argued that the superstructure works by securing consent rather than relying solely on coercion. Today, political parties and candidates use sophisticated tools, data analytics, targeted advertising, and messaging tailored to specific demographics to shape voter preferences. Take a look at recent elections around the world. Social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter have become battlegrounds where ideologies clash and narratives are crafted. But behind the scenes, algorithms prioritize content designed to maximize engagement, often amplifying sensational or polarizing messages. The result? Voters are exposed to a curated version of reality, shaped by both political actors and the platform's corporate interests. In such an environment, how free is the act of voting? Number 4. Resistance movements. Challenging the superstructure. Despite its pervasive influence, the superstructure is not immutable. Gramsci believed that the resistance was possible, particularly through the efforts of what he called organic intellectuals, people who emerge from within oppressed groups to challenge the dominant ideologies. Consider movements like Black Lives Matter or climate activism. These movements disrupt hegemonic narratives, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths about race, inequality, and environmental destruction. By challenging the dominant cultural frameworks, they create space for individuals to rethink their assumptions and potentially reclaim their agency. However, even resistance movements often face co-optation by the very superstructure they aim to challenge. For example, corporate brands adopting activist slogans or messages can dilute the radical potential of these movements, turning them into mere marketing tools. Closing the examples section. These case studies illustrate how cultural hegemony operates across different domains of life: education, media, politics, and even resistance. In each case, our sense of free will is entangled with forces that shape our desires, beliefs, and decisions. But recognizing these forces is the first step towards understanding whether and how we can break free. Next, we'll dive deeper into the dynamics of consent and coercion within the superstructure and explore the possibilities of resistance and agency. Critical analysis. Now that we've explored the mechanisms of cultural hegemony through case studies, let's critically analyze what this means for free will. Is it possible to act independently of superstructure, or are we forever tethered to its influence? Number 1. The illusion of choice. Gramsci's work suggests that what we perceive as choice is often deeply conditioned by the superstructure. For instance, when you choose a product, a candidate, or even a lifestyle, that decision is likely framed by the cultural norms and narratives you've been exposed to. Take consumer culture. The endless variety of products gives the illusion of freedom, but the options themselves are curated by corporate interests that prioritize profit over genuine diversity. Even our preferences, what we find beautiful, desirable, or necessary, are shaped by advertising and social norms. In this sense, choice often becomes a performance of freedom rather than its reality. But does this mean free will doesn't exist? Not necessarily. While our options may be shaped by the superstructure, our ability to reflect on and challenge those options opens a pathway to agency. The act of questioning, why do I want this? Who benefits from this choice? Can itself be a form of resistance. Number 2. Consent versus coercion. Gramsci's concept of hegemony revolves around the idea that power operates more through consent than overt coercion. This is crucial for understanding how the superstructure influences us. For example, most people comply with societal norms, not because they're forced to, but because they internalize them as common sense. Consider education. Students don't need to be coerced into believing certain historical narratives if they're presented as neutral or factual. Similarly, the media doesn't need to force us to adopt specific values. It simply reinforces them through repetition and normalization. The result is a society where people willingly perpetuate the status quo, believing their choices align with their own values, even when those values are shaped by the dominant ideology. This raises a critical question. Can we differentiate between what we truly believe and what the superstructure has taught us to believe? Is there such a thing as pure choice? Or are we always operating within the constraints of cultural conditioning? Number 3. The potential for resistance. Gramsci's framework isn't entirely pessimistic. While the superstructure is powerful, it is also contested. Dominant ideologies must constantly be reinforced because they are never absolute. This opens space for resistance, and it is here that free will might find its most authentic expression. Consider the role of organic intellectuals as Gramsci described them. These are individuals who emerge from oppressed or marginalized groups and challenge the dominant cultural narrative. Figures like Malcolm X, Greta Thunberg, or even movements like the Zapatistas illustrate how counter hegemonic ideas can disrupt the superstructure and inspire people to think and act differently. However, resistance is not without its challenges. Co-optation is a persistent threat. For example, when activism is commodified, like companies adopting feminist or environmental slogans to sell products, it risks neutralizing the transformative potential of resistance. This creates a paradox. Resistance within the superstructure can sometimes reinforce it, blurring the line between rebellion and complicity. Number 4. Free will as a dialectical process. Ultimately, free will in Gramsci's framework is best understood as a dialectical process, a constant negotiation between individual agency and structural constraints. While the superstructure shapes the boundaries of our choices, it also creates opportunities for reflection and resistance. This means free will is not a binary concept. It's neither absolute nor entirely absent. For example, when we become aware of the forces shaping our decisions, we can begin to challenge them. Choosing not to buy into a consumer trend, critically engaging with political messaging, or questioning societal norms are acts of agency that push against the superstructure. They may not represent total freedom, but they do represent meaningful resistance. The question, then, is not whether free will exists, but how can we expand its boundaries? How can we use our understanding of the superstructure to carve out spaces for genuine choice? And what responsibility do we have to challenge the forces that constrain not just our own agency, but that of others? Closing the analysis section. Gramsci's theories reveal the intricate ways power operates in shaping our sense of freedom. They challenge us to rethink what it means to act freely in a world where culture and ideology are so deeply intertwined with power. Yet they also remind us that resistance is always possible, that even within the constraints of the superstructure, we can find ways to push back and redefine what freedom means. Conclusion. As we've seen, the question of free will is far more complex than it first appears. Through Antonio Gramsci's lens of superstructures and cultural hegemony, we have explored how our choices are shaped by the ideologies and norms embedded in society. From education and media to politics and resistance, it's clear that the structures around us are not neutral, they are designed to maintain power. But this isn't a story of hopeless determinism. Gramsci reminds us that while the superstructure is pervasive, it is also contested. The very fact that power must be reinforced through consent means it is never absolute. This gives us room to reflect, resist, and redefine the boundaries of our agency. So, are we truly free? Perhaps not in the absolute sense, but freedom, as Gramsci's work suggests, is not a static state. It's a process. It's about becoming aware of the forces shaping us and actively engaging with them. It's about questioning what we've been taught to accept and imagining alternatives to the status quo. In the end, free will might not be the ability to make any choice we want. It might be the courage to recognize the limits of our choices and push against them anyway. Because in that act of resistance, however small, we assert our humanity, and maybe, just maybe, that's the truest form of freedom we have. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Gramsci, free will, and the superstructure. If this video sparked any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear from you in the comments.